Hi, we're still getting things set up, but this is the first official Morphite Podcast. My name is Mark Leedke. I'm here with my two brothers, Dan Leedke and Sam Leedke. Just a brief little bit about me. I have a little bit of experience with the Army National Guard. They gave me some mechanical experience. I worked on generators for a while. I was in there for 6 years. Worked a lot on mechanical stuff, but the generator experience also gave me some expertise with electronics as well in my introduction to that, and which I put to good use here recently, along with a lot of other little hobby things and skills I've learned along the way, other jobs and trades, and I'm more kind of the practical inventor side of Morphite, I suppose. And I'll hand it off with that to my brother, Sam.
Hello, I am Sam Leedke. I'm the middle brother. As he said, Morphite is our new venture here that we're starting off on. We're going to be working on a lot of different stuff. We have products that we're working on. We have media we're working on. We have music we're working on. So you definitely want to stay tuned to this. We'll be putting it up on all our social media, so we'll have all the regular setup, YouTube, Vimeo, as well as we'll arrange this as a podcast format so you can hook it up on your SoundCloud and on your podcast players and all that kind of stuff. I'm essentially, for lack of a better term, I'm the idea guy. Morphite was, as a term, is something I came up with a couple years ago now, from the idea of it being about living things, about morphite, coming from the Latin, the Greek actually. Is it the Greek or the Latin? Anyways, one of those old dead languages.
You made it up.
Well, I kind of made it up, but it was based on that idea of life, the idea of life. And so from there, of course, we'll be talking about things that will enhance life, things that will make life better, things that you can enjoy during life. We'll be working on a lot of that stuff. As far as my personal experience, I have worked in different industries, everywhere from manufacturing all the way up through advertising and everything in between, transportation. Pretty much you name it, I've worked in that field for 6 months or more. So I have a pretty good understanding of how business works, a pretty good understanding of how marketing works, all that kind of stuff, and we're going to be putting all that to use, of course, in Morphite. And then Dan, I don't know if you want to go ahead and tell the people who you are.
I will. Hello, I'm Dan Leedke. I'm the youngest brother. I am what I like to call the curator here at Morphite. I am a behind-the-scenes person, more of a detail guy, so you'll probably won't see as much of me, but you'll see my work in the editing and curating, putting things together. I play piano. I am classically trained, and that is what I studied in college. I have some experience, as the other brothers said, in various fields, retail, manufacturing. I love to learn about music and sound, and I'm always curious to know more about that, how that works, physics of that, the effect that music has on our lives and in every way, every part of us. So I am fascinated by that, and I'm excited to begin this journey of Morphite and to explore more of these things. So
I forgot to mention, all three of us do play instruments. Dan mentioned the piano. Sam plays trumpet. Dabbled in something else, right?
I can play guitar, kind of, and I sing.
Yeah. Oh, and there was some French horn thrown in there somewhere.
Yeah.
I play mostly guitar. I played clarinet in high school band, and I could probably pick it back up again, but we'll see. Next up, we wanted to discuss exactly what Morphite is. I guess we should start with the history there. Sam, how long ago would you say you had the idea for Morphite, or what came first? Because we have the VC5 elements, which we haven't talked about yet. We have Morphite. We have the concrete jungle stuff.
A lot of these ideas, I had threads of them going way back. I found I've been going through some of my old notebooks and ideas and sketches, and I have some things all the way from back in high school, I believe, that are relevant to Morphite. But as far as Morphite as a concept itself, probably the seeds started when Dan and I were living together back in, I don't know, the early 2000s. No, it was probably 2010-ish, maybe?
a little after, yeah 2012,
something like that.
2013.
Somewhere there. Yeah, before the world ended with the Mayan calendar and all that.
I was going to ask.
But we, and like I mentioned earlier, Morphite was just kind of a nebulous concept at first, but then figured we'd actually develop it into a thing, into actually making it into a company, into an entity. So it wasn't just something that was floating around in my head. And then it was just here recently when we all actually were able to get together and stayed together here in Indianapolis and decided to go ahead and go forward with producing things and making things and So that's kind of where we're at with all that.
Yeah, and I started looking into what's going to be our first real product, the Sonovox. And we all love music. We all love old. There's these clips on YouTube of old stuff like that, old music, old timey things, 30s, 40s, 50s, anywhere in there. We love it.
Yeah.
Spike Jones, a lot of those different silly things as well. But the Sonovox is one of those inventions from way back then. It precedes the TalkBox, actually. And Dan started explaining to me how Sam had these ideas back when about making a modern version of a Sonovox, which is basically based on vibrations, like all sound. And so we started trying to do, I was like, that wouldn't be that hard. And between the two of us, we started coming up with, hey, we could probably make one of these. So we've gone through a few iterations, and now we're, up to our current prototype. And all of it's gone pretty well so far.
Yeah.
To finish up all that, what is Morphite? I think of Morphite, and we've all discussed this quite a bit, as a creative company, more or less, because we're going to do multiple things. We have this prototype of this product we're going to make, which is a musical product to help people make music, or professionals make music, whoever wants to use it. It should be easy and relatively cheap with the way we're doing it. I've been doing a lot of experimenting on my end with 3D printing and things. We have that on the one hand. On the other hand, we have future projects. Down the road, for me as an inventor, I actually want to get into drones. I have a lot of ideas for those and things we're going to do involving that. You have more story stuff in line for the future, I'm assuming. Do you want to touch on VC5?
VC5 is one idea. It's I'm trying to think of which angle to come at it from.
Maybe start with the story, I guess.
Yeah. So essentially, VC5 stands for Vitruvius Charlemagne and his 5 metal friends. And Vitruvius Charlemagne is a young man. We're not sure exactly what time period he lives in yet, but he has a virtual band, essentially, that he's created, or a group of musicians that accompanies him as he makes music, and they're all based off of different instruments that have a voice. So, for example, the Sonovox is the first piece in that, because you could take any instrument, whether it's a keyboard, a guitar, whatever, and you basically pipe it through into the Sonovox device, which we'll show at some point, but then you formulate the vowels and the consonants and everything that the sound makes. So essentially, it's almost like a voice replacer in real time, in real life. It's not a digital editing process or anything like that. It happens live right there in the moment, which is nice because then you can actually use it to make music, make live music and all of that. But that's just one piece, and we're working on creating different vocal type devices for the other 4 characters, and those will be what he's able to, that accompanies him. But it's a musical project, so we can explore some different musical things we want to do within that context. It also kind of is a combination of some ideas I saw that I liked, but I haven't seen explored a lot, of an animated virtual band. So you have things like the Archies, I believe? Mm-hmm. You had the Monkeys, which wasn't animated, but it was basically a virtual band. It wasn't a real band, and then it became a real band and all that. You have groups like the Gorillaz. I'm trying to think of who else. There may have been 1 or 2 others. Interstellar, 5555.
The Daft Punk.
There's some other different projects like that really inspired me to come up with this idea of a completely virtual band in that sense, where, like I said, we can explore some different fun musical stuff with that.
Can you explain a bit about how VC5 fits into the larger Morphite cinematic universe, if you will?
Yeah.
And do you call that, what do you call that universe?
Okay, the universes. Well, Concrete Jungle is a story concept I am exploring. I have the first episode written, and I'll be working on completing that. To shorten it up, Concrete Jungle is basically the start of some of this, because within that, it's an alternate timeline of reality where there is a rift that happens. There is a crashing of dimensions that occurs. And because of this, there's a lot of technology and that gets dumped from one side into the other. So if you can think of the alternate timeline, and one timeline has already developed, flying cars, let's say, and the other timeline is not, and then suddenly all these flying cars are dumped into the other dimension, and then things that these people have invented that haven't been created on this side are dumped into theirs, and there's a bunch of confluence there. It is essentially the basic idea behind Concrete Jungle. And because of this rift in the Concrete Jungle story, there are people who are then spliced or merged with objects or creatures or buildings, many different things, when this rift occurs, because these dimensions cross over and then split up again. So the main character of Concrete Jungle is a gorilla man called Jake, he ends up becoming a detective as he tries to learn how to be a detective because he's looking for his lost, the love of his life, who he lost during the rift. So that's just a very condensed version of that. But because of this then starts, as you mentioned, basically the cinematic universe or this alternate timeline where all of these different projects, story-wise and narrative-wise, fall into that timeline. And some of these ideas are not fully developed yet, so I'll just leave it on that.
Next up, I wanted to explain a little bit about the Sonovox. I know a little bit of this. I'm going to try not to get too technical because I'm going to make a separate video that actually goes through the nuances and complications of everything about that, because I do want to get technical for those who would appreciate it. Basically, the Sonovox, however, the LSM5, we're at the 5th iteration now, because I'm going to detail that in the other video, obviously, but many other prototypes so far. It's involved a lot of 3D printing, a lot of different things. The Sonovox, the history behind it, I went to it a little bit. It was invented in 1939, and it was by a man and his son. I don't remember the names at the moment. I'll put that on the other video. But they started producing them. It was most commonly known, though, or more widely known, by people like Alvino Ray, who had a traveling, he used to do an act with his guitar. It's called the singing guitar. And his wife, as I recall, would stand behind the curtain, and she had basically 2 speakers, like little speakers. And he would play the music, or play his, I guess it's a lap guitar. And as he played it, he would use weird effects and things, and she would use that to control the echoes coming out of her, like echoing in her throat, and shape it with her lips as it came out. And thus, it was the first version of the Sonovox. There's also a story about the guy that invented it, and his son, that when it was either him or Alvino Ray, I've seen both stories, but it's the same story, just different people, that he was using a razor, a mechanical razor from back in the day, a mechanical shaver. And as he was doing it, his wife called to him from the other room. He was shaving. In the middle of shaving, he responded to her with it against his throat vibrating, and she claimed that it made him sound like a robot, and this gave him the idea. Alvino Ray claimed to have gotten the idea as well, or he wanted to make it work. He took a carbon microphone from a pilot's mic, actually, that's a flying pilot would use, and reversed the polarity or something, and used that's how he made it work for his. But it was popular back then. In those instances, there are 2 clips we're going to link to somewhere on YouTube that are old, and one's Alvino Ray, and another one is Stringy, the talking. The effect was used for quite a few things. Disney, I believe, used it for the locomotive, actually, in Dumbo, the original.
Yes, yeah. If you've ever seen Dumbo, that voice where he says "All aboard, let's go," that was using the same thing. They had it plugged into a phonograph, I think.
Yeah, it was used for a lot of things back then. But then, at a certain point in time, the talkbox was invented, which, once again, I'll get more technical on that in the next video. But with the invention of the talkbox, it kind of fell by the wayside, because the talkbox was, at the time, with technology at the time and everything, it was much better. Much more effective, much more efficient on stage and everything. People get more volume out of it. So the Sonovox actually was not, it just fell into obscurity for a while. The only place you may have heard of it, or heard it anyways, not of it, is on the radio. A lot of radio DJs actually still use it to do, they get it real close to the mic and they use it to record certain things like jingles. Jingles, yes.
Jingles, station announcements sometimes, things like that, yeah.
But that's a little bit of the history about that, where it came from. We're on the 5th iteration and moving along swiftly. I've got all the models and everything down, the 3D models. It's just getting all the kinks worked out and printing them now. And winding coils and doing all that. It's been a long learning process. You guys have anything you want to contribute about the Sonovox that I forgot? The history? Because I know there's more to it.
Yeah, I just think the Sonovox is exciting because, as I mentioned earlier with VC5, it enables you to give your instrument a voice. So if you are playing something, if you are... you could even do it in tandem, like he was mentioning. Alvino Ray would play, and then his wife would be the one doing the voice. So if he played like a wind instrument, or like an electronic wind instrument, like an EWI or something, and then someone else could do the voice. There's all kinds of different things that opens up for experimentation, for music, also for special effects, for vocal effects with animation or film projects. I mean, there's tons of things you can do with it. It's really just limited by your imagination of what you want to do with it. So that's why I think it's pretty exciting.
I'm excited for the future. We're really excited. As we've mentioned before, all three of us are really into music. We all love music. We have for a long time. We grew up with music, and it's been very, very diverse. Our parents listened to everything from the Beatles to, or when I was little, I mean, oldies, the Beatles, Beach Boys, up to classical music. So it was a wide variance.
Yeah.
And similar with movies. We were all saying we grew up with cartoons, we grew up with black and white movies from the library. We watched all kinds of different things when it came out, but we also watched a lot of old stuff. We have we kind of got I feel like we have a decent palette starting off for all that because we've been exposed to a lot. Sure. Also, our background's a little more diverse too. Our parents were missionaries to South America. We spent 4 or 5 years down in the 90s, mid-90s, down in Ecuador, South America, which also gives us a little different perspective on things.
Definitely. Yeah, no, it definitely, we talk about that a lot, about how because we are from that third culture kids, you may have heard that term before, a lot of military kids get the same thing where because they've traveled around so much, they haven't lived exclusively in the United States or even in one location. You get a kind of an interesting cultural perspective where you're able to see the differences between America and other countries. You're able to see the difference between different places in America. And it gives you an appreciation, for one thing, of certain things, but it also gives you then a little bit of objectivity when it comes to other things, cultural, media, that kind of stuff, where, as he said, you've kind of got a different palette available to you where you've been exposed to different things and you can understand the context of things differently. I hope I'm not being too vague about that, but it is a little hard to explain unless you've lived that way, unless you've been in multiple countries or you've lived outside the U.S. for a period of time. I know for myself, it gives me a much greater appreciation for the United States, for living here, for the freedoms, for all of that. But it also allows you to be a little more, I said objective, but when you're looking at something, to not just take it at face value, but to be able to kind of think about, like I said, the larger context around things a little more. But because of that, all three of us have that a little different perspective on things. And then, of course, we've all lived in different places throughout the country as well. I mean, I've lived all the way out in Colorado.
We've done lots of traveling.
Yeah, we've gone all over. I can't say that I've been to all 48 of the lower states because when I was driving the truck, I know I drove across a lot of states, but I don't know if it was all of them. But I know it's close.
Another element to it is that our dad is from Peru.
Yes,
right. He is not originally American, so I think that adds even more of a difference in how we grew up. We were not a typical American family growing up. We didn't speak Spanish in the household all the time, and I actually lost a lot of my Spanish because I was so young when we came back from Ecuador. So the older brothers retained more of it. But yes, I have noticed a lot of difference culturally. Like we mentioned before, musically, we have different influences. We grew up listening to South American folk music, which almost nobody has heard of, unless you're specifically have that heritage, the Andean, which we want to explore more, fusing that with other things, using those instruments and those concepts. We love the sound of the panpipes and the quena and all these different charango and all these different instruments.
Yeah, we've got a cajon sitting over there.
Yeah, we have a cajon.
It's a box.
So, yes, I think it's definitely our unique and eclectic upbringing has definitely affected things.
And I know in the future, actually, that's a big enough topic. We probably will do. We're planning right now on doing this podcast mostly for Morphite business stuff, but then to relate or to address other issues just for conversation, to have people on, guests, etc. We are going to start a second podcast as well, which will probably be something like semi-weekly. I don't know. It'll be a little more often. This is we haven't decided what the timeline's going to be yet, but depending on how this goes, right now we're kind of at once a month. But if it goes faster and easier, we may do it sooner, closer together as well. We'll see. So we may at some point in the future do a podcast on South America and other foreign cultures and all that, because that would be a good a good topic for a full one. Maybe we should just take a moment to discuss a little bit more in depth what Morphite means to us. We would like to make a difference in the world. We would like to make the world a better place. I don't know if anyone out there's seen Silicon Valley, but it is literally kind of what we want to do as well. We would like for our projects, I know for my part, and I felt this resonating with you guys too, that to an extent we would like our projects to be meaningful. Mm-hmm. We want it to be valuable stuff. We're not just going to make fidget spinners. We're not going to do something that's just going to not add to society in any way. Mm-hmm. This project, actually, this Sonovox, it could potentially have, we've looked into the medical side of things. For example, there's a potential that could be used for people who cannot talk, their vocal cords are destroyed, something like that. They still got that chamber in there, it can still echo and create sound, it's just they can't create the sound. Mm-hmm. This would enable them to do that. They could potentially learn to speak with it and whatnot. There are lots of applications this could be used for. And we just haven't seen it. That's the other thing. We haven't seen it done. Right. I got to Googling. It's true. Nobody is, except for little YouTubers, people on Twitter who just do it for fun. Mm-hmm. And they'll make a set. I saw a guy who made a set that were real heavy duty, real big, heavy things. And he put them against his neck and it worked, but he was getting the DJ effect. He had to hold these huge, heavy things on his neck, and then he had to get real close to the mic, and then he got, fairly good sound. Mm-hmm. But I think with our design we can do much better, actually. Yeah. But that's something we want to be meaningful. Drones in the future could be meaningful for helping for, if we develop models for rescue, for search and rescue type operations. Just to give a few examples. But
yeah, and we're all, in case that wasn't clear, we're all Christians. And so obviously our higher calling is to please God, is to be salt and light in the world for Him. And that's the other reason why when we all started talking about Morphite, we talked about some of the things we could accomplish, some of the things that we could make and do. And we realized that a lot of these things we can use to further the cause of Christ, to change the world. Like you said, there's we haven't gotten into a lot of our ideas yet, but there are many things we want to do that would make the world a better place, honestly. We've seen there's a lot of industries out there where everyone knows that things could be better. Everyone knows things could be changed, could be fixed. But because it's not the biggest moneymaker, or it's not what the minds of the time have come up with, then it's not being pursued. And we'd like to get into some of those areas. As Mark said, he's kind of an inventor mindset. Dan has some of the calculative mindset, and I'm more of an idea guy. And with our powers combined, we realized when we started discussing all together that we have the potential to actually do things and make things. And for me, it's exciting because many of those things were things that are just dreams in my head, just ideas, just, hey, wouldn't it be cool if? And then when I began talking with these guys and we realized, well, we can make that if into a reality, and we can actually do some of these things. The Sonovox is really just our first foray into that, to test the waters, so to speak, to actually make something, a physical product coming from these ideas. They weren't completely original to us, but we want to enhance and expound upon that. So that's really kind of the essence of Morphite as well.
We want to produce media and to tell stories that have an impact, that are meaningful, that are not just entertainment, that are not just buying into whatever is the latest fads and trends. And we've discussed much about, in the animation world, for instance, the trends and the designs and the way that they do things, the way that CG animation has dominated the industry for the last few years. We'd like to pioneer perhaps some ways of bringing back the beauty and the craft of hand-drawn animation in a way that is still not as difficult as it used to be. We can use modern technology, we can use the benefit of how things have developed in software and in algorithms, but we can combine that with the human touch and with that kind of storytelling.
We have a lot of ideas for both combining technologies as well as like you said, using things that have already been developed even for other fields to further animation, to bring back two-dimensional animation, hand-drawn animation, but also to give it even more life in some instances, or just more, make that pipeline easier in some ways. But there's some of that. There's a lot of those things that, again, we've discussed and we've seen and we've said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if someone did this? And we see things that people are developing, but essentially a lot of it comes down to, in any field, whether it's the animation, music, or machines, all of it, a lot of it comes back to everyone in those creative industries is making whatever's going to make them the most money. They're not making whatever's going to affect the world, whatever's going to change things, whatever's going to make an impact or be unique and creative. They're just following along with whatever the trend is to make a bunch of money off of it. And it's kind of a sad place to see a lot of things where we used to see, especially in the arts, great and wonderful pieces of art, sculpture. I mean, there's all kinds of things that down through the ages you look back and you see, wow, a lot of those things were glorifying to God or were just amazing works, and you don't see that as much anymore. Again, I don't want to get too much in the weeds about that, but we were just talking the other day about the problems with this furtherance of mediocrity in the creative arts. And we'd like to push the envelope on a lot of those things.
We're actually all in the right place right now to where we can actually make all this happen.
Mm-hmm.
We can start working on it. We have enough resources. Combine that with the fact that technology has come far enough now. We can buy, cameras are cheaper, microphones are cheaper, technology is a little better, quality is increased. All these factors combined make it possible for us today to do this as three brothers. Whereas if we had all these ideas back in, let's say we had them in 94 or 95, 96, somewhere in there, early 2000s even.
Yeah.
We would not have been able to do this.
Right. Well, and with the reach of the internet as well, is one thing I wanted to make mention of, because we'll be putting this up on all of the different social media platforms we can and posting our podcasts and our media, things we come up with on those. But if you like the sound of any of this, if you think, hey, these guys sound like they're onto something, or let's at least see where this goes, we'd love for you to join us in subscribing and following all of that stuff, like, share, all that. But we do need that. Whether you know us personally or not, or like I said, you just want to see what else we come up with, please hit that button, whatever it is, like, subscribe, all that stuff.
Smash that button.
Yeah, but without it, then our message and the things we're making won't get out there because they won't be seen by other people. So I'd encourage you to do that.
All right. Well, you guys, thank you very much for being here with us today. This was our first podcast. We're still getting set up and everything, as I said in the beginning, but we thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and there will be more to come soon.